With the right tools, companies now have the ability to hire and work with location independent freelancers. FounderMate even does this. I know a ton of brands are doing this. Companies also have access to more labor and advanced tools than ever before, with more than 68% of businesses actively using outsourcing to propel their profitability and efficiency. Furthermore, leveraging the right platforms and partners to help you navigate the nuances of compliance to de-risk your journey are crucial. This next panel is titled Think Bigger, Expand Your Brand Through the Power of Partnerships, and will be led by moderator Michael Norman. Michael is the founder of WeFunder and the COO of Rome Research. Michael, welcome and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Michelle.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. It's so great to have it coming in with so much energy. Thank you. That's what this whole day is about. I will let you take it from here. Can't wait to sit back and watch.
Great. Well, so great to be here with you all today, folks. From what I've seen, the schedule's been jam-packed with exciting content, and we plan to continue that with our panel. So as Michelle mentioned, we're going to focus on how to build successful partnerships. I'm really excited about the panelists we have with us today. So if each of our panelists could just quickly introduce themselves and share one brief insight that you've learned about what makes a successful partnership, we can get started. So Prerna, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, I'm Prerna Gupta, CEO of Hooked. Hooked is the #1 storytelling platform for Gen Z. We tell stories in 3 formats: text, audio, and video, and we reach over 100 million Gen Zers around the world. And we've partnered with many celebrities throughout our journey. And I've actually been building mobile experiences for teens my entire career since the early days of the App Store, and have been working with kind of traditional celebrities and influencers back in like YouTube days and all of those things. And so I've kind of run the gamut in terms of partnerships and had many failed partnerships and many successful ones. And I think that the one sort of the overarching, kind of lesson I've learned is don't try and fit a round peg into a square hole, basically. It's find the partnerships where there's a natural match, where there's a fit. Make it easy for people. Go find celebrities and influencers who's really resonate with your brand and genuinely love your product. They are going to be much, much better partners and evangelists for your product than someone who's just kind of doing it to make a buck.
Perfect. Well, let's just go right to the right, Shelby.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Shelby Toto. I work at Sovos, and we're primarily a B2B organization that focuses on delivering tax compliance through software. I'm in a little bit of a unique and interesting position where I talk to a lot of C-level positions and talk to them about what their growth strategies are versus organic growth, more maybe versus organic acquisition strategies that they might have as well. And what we try to do is understand a little bit more on how to protect the customer experience all the way through to the internal experience. So that would be one of the pieces of advice that I would have, is make sure as you're partnering and many of the different aspects as you grow, to make sure that your vendor or your partner is future thinking for you. So what is your growth strategy? What does it look like internally? So on and so forth.
Perfect. Thank you. John.
You here, Michael? I'm John Repka, the VP of Sales at Paro. Paro is a marketplace for finance and accounting professionals. Think of us like Uber for CFOs and CPAs. And what we found is that if you want to take that concept of a marketplace, a labor marketplace for that matter, and apply it to something as white collar and as sophisticated as finance and accounting, you got to look at things a little bit differently. And so our marketplace is based on the belief that supply comes first. And if we create a phenomenal experience for our freelancers, great things will happen. So that comes from a proprietary vetting process, matchmaking process to make sure we get the right CFO and the right accountant match with every company. And since the earliest days of Paro, we've leveraged channel partnerships as a huge growth lever. And something that I was taught very early on when it comes to partnerships that still governs us to this day is the concept of triple wins. In that a successful partnership can't just be a win for you, and it can't just be a win for your partner. It's that last win that seems to be the most difficult and the most impactful, and that's that the end user, the end customer, the end buyer also has to benefit from that partnership in a way that they do beyond if they had just found this vendor or this company on the street. So excited to talk more about this. Super passionate about partnerships, and feeling pretty lucky to be on this panel with all these great companies.
Thanks, John. Mickey, why don't you go next?
Yeah, hi. Nice to meet you, Michael. I'm Mickey Onvral. I am the CEO of Bonobos. We are the better fitting menswear company, 63 stores here in the US, but predominantly an e-commerce business here in the US. So we have done all kinds of different partnerships. I think, you know, everything from celebrity and influencer to brand partnerships to media partnerships. I think the governing principle across all of them is singular clarity of purpose and objective. It can be very easy to kind of throw the kitchen sink and say, oh, and it can do this for us and it can do that. And the challenge with that comes in the execution. So if you have singular clarity of purpose, then you can execute with excellence. And at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Excellent. All right, Michelle, why don't you wrap us up?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Cordero Grant, founder and CEO of Lively. Lively is a community first and foremost. We have over 150,000 organic brand ambassadors. We also sell products, which are bras, undies, swimwear, loungewear, active, and self-care. And our sole purpose is to really inspire women to be passionate, purposeful, and confident in everything they do and how they live and lead their lives. We are direct to consumer first and foremost. We also have 4 brick and mortar stores, a partnership with Nordstrom, and recently just launched with Target. Partnerships is why we exist. You know, our ambassadors are our #1 partners, now 150,000 strong, but really because it's a two-way street. Partnership for us is not just about growing Lively, it's about growing individuals and what their personal platform may be, or what they believe the world should learn more about, whether that's entrepreneurship, succulents, or mental health. But partnerships also goes a bit further for us. You know, we were acquired 3 years after we launched, so our acquiring company is a huge partner to us. And really everyone that we've partnered with, we've gone against the grain. So the way we partnered with Target or Nordstrom, it's not the normal way. We like to really kind of break the box and break the rules and create a new type of partnership. And we find that that really works for both sides. And so really excited to continue this conversation.
Outstanding. Great. So I want to start with a few questions for the consumer companies, and then John and Shelby will kind of transition a bit over to the B2B side. So, I mean, it's clear, I think, for all of us here, the right partnership can really turbocharge your business and be a huge win. But something I see startup founders make all the time, a mistake they make all the time, is really investing a lot of energy into partnerships before they're really ready. So I'm curious to hear from the consumer companies about the trade-offs between kind of focusing, you know, in the sense that you spoke about, Mickey, in a hyper narrow sense on the perfect partner and trying to make sure that that works, versus kind of being more opportunistic and focusing on the relationships that emerge organically, Parana, as you referenced in your intro. So Parana, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer in focus, and actually product comes first. Product is everything. You don't have any, your partnerships have zero value if you haven't if you don't have product market fit and you don't have a product that people love. I think it's a big mistake that many founders make, which is spending all of their time on business development and, you know, trying to kind of get fancy names, you know, associated with their product or with their startup. And it's not only a huge waste of money, it's a huge waste of time. So focus first on building a great product. And when you have a great product, the partnerships are so much easier and so much more efficient to make happen. So that's, again, I think there are some founders that maybe it's also my bias because I really am a product CEO and I love to just spend time with my team and build things for customers. But I do believe in all of, with where our partnerships have failed was when we were trying to force something to happen before we were ready.
Perfect. And Mickey, you see, the gamut, as you referenced, from all the different ways that you all partner and the size of the company as it is right now. So how do you see that trade-off between really kind of like thinking strategically in advance around exactly the type of partnership you want and then going out and landing it, versus just kind of surveying what's happening in your community and being opportunistic?
It's a really great question. I agree with Parana. I am a focus junkie. I think that actually, one of the death knells of startups can be you've got more ideas before breakfast than you know what to do with, and you try and do them all, and then you end up doing none of them well. So I'm not a fan of spaghetti against the wall. I'm also a fan of having, very clear, obviously, strategy, focus, and also sequencing. And I couldn't agree more with Prerna about, the flywheel that starts with great product. I think what can happen and where some of that more organic partnerships can emerge, Michael, is probably less in something like, a distribution partnership. So we have a big partnership with Nordstrom, that I would say was very much in service of driving our e-commerce business and broadening the reach and exposure of the brand. And we could do that because, we had a great product that honestly they loved, and they were an early investor in Bonobos actually, which is how that partnership came to pass. So that was very much a case of, building that flywheel where everything drove back to our e-com business. I think where the organic part can come is actually in the marketing landscape. As your community builds, you can often see opportunities within your community that you can lean into. And that's where I think the more opportunistic part comes. So, for example, we've seen, and again, I feel like I'm copying off Prerna now, but we have seen, our most successful partnerships been where people organically love our product. They comment on us, they tweet about us, they follow us on Instagram, and we lean into that. And in fact, only last week, Jake Tapper commented on how he loves to wear bonobo suits. So of course, what's our first move? Our first move is to reach out to him and say, how can we partner more effectively? And similarly, Justin Rose, many of you, if you're golfers, may know him. He came to us 3.5 years ago and said, look, I'm ending my partnership with my apparel partner. Love your product. Basically, I want my wardrobe from everything on the course to off to be bonobos. What can we do together? So I think that's where some of the organic piece comes, is in the marketing, once you've built those early days of a community and how you can lean into the opportunities there.
Perfect. And the consistency that I heard from both of you is just that importance of having product market fit first. If you don't have a great product, if you don't really have kind of, something to excite potential partners, you're just going to be banging your head against the wall trying to, manifest something which is unlikely to come through. Great. So, Mickey, you mentioned community, and Michelle, it sounds like you really built your company on the back of this community, right? 150,000 ambassadors. That's a pretty large scale by any measure. So I'm curious how that kind of being a core part of your business has impacted the way you approach partnerships, and what opportunities have arisen as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for brands to be strong and, really live on decade after decade, they need to be timeless and timely. And in building Lively, I realized community is the way that you can continue to be timely. So we actually built the community before we even launched and sold our first product. We started building, we had 150 women strong when we launched our brand. And the thesis was that if they are part of every facet of the journey, from picking images to copy to helping us with product, then you can start to build your brand off of that. And so now what our community does is they tell us what they need. They tell us from a product perspective what they need. And an example is our Busty Bralette is a product where women are like, hey, I'm a double D, a triple D, and I have a 32, 34-inch rib cage. Where's the bralette for me? We spent a year and we made it, and it went viral. I mean, it was sold out for 6 months, billions of impressions, and still to this day, one of our #1 products, to the point where someone found it in Target last week and did a TikTok video on it, and that got 3 million views. And so the virality of what happens when you listen to your community, and they're a part of every facet of how the brand conducts themselves. Not only do they help us with product, they also tell us what we need to talk about. And so, during important moments within, society, they're taking platforms and they're having discussions. They're telling us how they need to live when they're in quarantine at home during COVID, and then adjacent products that go with that. So the point is the word partnerships is like partnerships. Like, it doesn't need to be this big thing. It should be scrappy and human. And I tell founders all the time, when you're launching a brand, you don't need to do partnerships. You can just do interaction. And interaction should be light and simple and low lift. And I think when we launched our brand, our greatest interactions were simple. We called up SoulCycle and we said, hey, we're pretty sure everyone that works at SoulCycle would be interested in Lively in some way. Can we bring some rosé to your headquarters and bring our product and introduce the brand? And they were like, yes. They were like, let's call 15 other companies, Pop Sugar and whatever company we could get into, bakeries that had a big social following. The point is partnerships does not need to be hard and heavy. It should be human and light.
And I like the fact that you were leading with an offer there, right? It wasn't an ask as much as it was, adding to the experience that they had already curated for their own community. Is obviously oftentimes the best way to start. But there's something super interesting about what you just mentioned that I do find there's a tension depending upon the company, which is how much you want to allow your partners or your community to influence your roadmap, right? For you all, the community is such a core part of the business that it makes complete sense for them to be a huge driver in terms of how you were thinking about that. But for Mickey and Parana, I'm curious how much you kind of involve the feedback from your partners in actually impacting your roadmap.
This is a great question, and I imagine it varies a lot just based on the size of your audience and the type of product you have. Our product is completely digital, and our audiences are huge, and so it's really easy to get bias in qualitative feedback. When we hear, generally the people that are giving us feedback are either super users and really in love with everything about our product and are asking for features that are probably irrelevant for the majority of our audience, or they hate something, they hate our product and are never going to use it and are mad about something. And so we use the qualitative feedback, just to get a sense of some, are there problems or is there kind of a leading indicator or something we should be looking at? But for the most part, we look at data, metrics. We live and breathe metrics, and our product, is really driven by the engagement behaviors that we're seeing and where we're seeing repeat engagement versus where we're seeing drop off. And so it's not to say that, of course, we listen to our community and it's very important, but we observe our community more than anything else.
Mickey, how do you all balance that at Bonobos?
Yeah, just to build on that, I think data is the what, qual is often the why. So why do you say that? And I think those two things together can give you the macro insight of which to build. And so just to give, sort of a real example of that, obviously Bonobos had a pretty tough year during COVID. We had a large part of our business was sort of suiting and wear to work, which you're not really wearing these days. And so we could see that happening in our data. We could see what was happening with tailored. It was pretty self-evident why. What it enabled us to do was to sort of say, okay, so where do we want to focus our energies right now, and launch some new products that we felt that would be relevant now, but will sort of sustain into the future. And so I think it's about the what, it's about the why. It's also about, to that point, a sort of a dose of sort of intuition, which is, I can't react to everything. Otherwise I'll be all over the shop. And frankly, get nothing done, back to my point about focus. So it's that intuition of what do I think is going to persist and is going to drive the business in the long term. There's not a lot of necessarily science to that. I think that's intuition. And I also would add that consumers can't tell you what they don't know. And what I mean by that is there's a point at which you have to lead your audience as much as follow.
Perfect. Great. Well, I want to shift a little bit over to the B2B side of the world here. So, whatever partnership you're interested in forming, there should be a checklist or a set of criteria that you're using to evaluate it. And John, I'm curious how you all think about that at Paro. Like, what is the list you go through when you're evaluating whether or not you're going to spend time working on a particular partnership?
I mean, the biggest one, this is what I challenge, our partnership team, our reps to do every time, is to think about, is this partner going to want to refer us in? If this is a push rather than a pull, it's not going to scale. And so whether that means you make them look good in some fashion, you make their life easier, you help them grow faster, my favorite, you make them better serve their clients. And if you can work backwards from that, and there's an intuitive link of, we want to, in this case, refer Paro in because it's going to better serve our client, it's going to make our lives easier. Well, now you have the ingredient of something that's going to scale. And from there, and sorry if this is overly simplistic, it's, can we drive to a pilot, right? There's dozens of great ideas, everything works on paper. And if you can't drive to that first pilot, that second pilot, it's never going to scale from there. And so to me, that's kind of the 1-2 checklist. Does this make intuitive sense to benefit the partner? We come last. And then secondly, can we get that second off the ground to see if the sum is the total is more than the sum of the parts?
And one follow-up question on there, John, right? So there's this transition from it looking perfect on paper and then driving through, to a pilot. And I feel like there's this kind of no man's land in between where you're trying to figure out, is it time to stop moving forward, or is it just going to take a couple more calls to close the deal? So how do you approach that?
So I'm a sales guy, so I'll shoot you straight here. That comes during discovery, right? Up front, it's, hey, if we're going to move forward with this, do you have a list of 5 potential clients, or these are 5 potential channels that, if all of this makes sense, we can move forward with by the end of the week, by the end of the month? And if you can't get a line very upfront in terms of, hey, this makes sense for both of us, we're both gonna be excited about this, you're just gonna waste your time. So I love the conversation. I actually saw way more parallels than I had maybe assumed coming in the D2C world. Right? Who are gonna be your best partners? It's organic growth. They're evangelists. They're people that love your product and want to refer it to their clients, to their channel. So I think there's really a lot less difference than it might appear on the surface.
Great. So Shelby, I want to turn to you now. There's always this tension, in startups where you're trying to figure out how much am I solving today's problems versus trying to think about, what my challenges are going to be 2 to 3 years down the line. And so when you're thinking about partnerships on either side of the table, what do you think the right way to approach that question is?
Absolutely. So I think about this in a couple different aspects. First off, what is the goal that we're trying to accomplish? Maybe it's increasing the customer reach out. So if you're looking at our growth, maybe it's looking at solutions like websites that might actually reach out directly to the customer to provide that experience. So it's really important to think about things like how often you would want to use it. What does the customer experience need to look like? And on the flip side of that, if you're not necessarily the one who wants to do all of the heavy investment in the front end to build out the solution and look at what that customer experience is, there are partners already there in the market doing similar things. Like if you look at Amazon or Walmart, eBay, where they're actually marketplaces that you can sell your products directly to their trusted customer base. Those customers are already going there, sometimes daily even, so you can actually increase the way you're reaching out through an organic partnership just like that.
Great. Great, Mickey, I want to turn back to you for a moment. You mentioned, obviously, like many companies, the challenges that you all had from the pandemic and the impact that had on your core business. How have you seen, or are you seeing, kind of the types of partnerships that are going to be valuable for you moving forward change because of the shifting nature of the market?
I think that the shift is more about the shift in sort of our business and our priorities and the impact that COVID has had on us versus a universal shift that I think we're seeing in partnerships, to be honest. I say that because I believe that at the end of the day, the fundamentals of good business practice, good marketing practice has been the same for a very long time. And I don't think that even though COVID has knocked many of us sideways, those fundamentals change around, reaching your audience in the most effective way, in a way that's meaningful, in building partnerships that, create deeper engagement, et cetera, et cetera. Those things haven't changed. I think the execution or what might be important to companies has changed more than anything.
Makes a lot of sense. So I want to ask a kind of broad question to everyone, but Parana, maybe you can start us out. partnerships evolve, they change over time. You don't get a certain piece of value that you were assuming you would get, or some other kind of value arises that you hadn't planned on. So you, for Hooked, were able to compile a pretty interesting set of celebrity investors that is really, I think, exciting for any consumer app. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how valuable or not valuable, to be quite honest, those fancy investors have been for the growth of the app itself.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a mixed bag. So I would say it's really important, if you're paying for partnerships, or any kind of celebrity endorsement, which we didn't. I mean, we paid in the form of equity, but they invested money in our startup, and so we gave up some room on our cap table, but it was a relatively low risk for us. But we've done other partnerships in the past where we did pay. And if you're paying for celebrity endorsements, be wary and make sure that there is an authenticity to the celebrity's interest. We've had some of our celebrity investors who've been super engaged and super helpful and super valuable. Ashton Kutcher, who is, I think at this stage, really, a very prolific tech investor in his own right. As much as he is a celebrity, he's been incredible. And we've had others that have really, been not as involved. So what I would say is, it kind of goes back to, so I'll give an example of where in my previous startup where we were doing music apps, this wasn't actually endorsement, and it wasn't an equity investor. It was T-Pain, the rapper, the hip hop artist. In my previous company, we did an app called I Am T-Pain, which was an auto-tune app. And this is, in my mind, one of the most fruitful celebrity partnerships I've ever done. And it was purely organic, as we've talked about previously. He reached out to us. He kind of was known for auto-tune. There wasn't a big auto-tune app out yet. And so we created a product together, essentially, that really fit his brand. And it helped him further his own vision for his career, which is he wanted to be known as someone who was doing something innovative in apps. And so because of that, we didn't have to write in anything like, you need to promote us at a minimum of X number of concerts, or you need to tweet about us this many times, or anything like that. And the deal was primarily a revenue share deal. So our incentives were aligned. It wasn't super transactional. It wasn't like, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z and you'll get this much money. It was really it was this sense that 1 + 1 = 10, basically. And he really took to that, and he went out and evangelized us all the time, everywhere, at concerts, on social media, talked with all his friends, all his other celebrity friends, who then reached out to us for additional partnerships. So I think the value comes from there being kind of this potential for exponential growth, with both people partnering together, and this real genuine authentic desire to evangelize your product. And if you don't have that, more likely than not, it's going to be a waste of time and money.
Which gets back to the product market fit piece that we keep returning to, that you have to have first. Great. Well, I'd love to open that up to anyone else who has kind of a great story or a particular kind of insight around partnerships, kind of, evolving and changing and adding, different value than one had assumed when they were initially formed.
One thing that I'll share is timing. I think, when you start a business and your business is growing fast, opportunities will come your way. So kind of like you said, you wake up at breakfast with a bazillion ideas, you'll also have opportunities inbounding as well. And I think one thing that we learned is that sometimes a no today is a better yes tomorrow, and like really evaluate where your business is and when you say yes to a partner. Like Nordstrom, for example, for us came and invited us into their distribution when we first launched Lively. We didn't know enough about our brand, our experience. We needed to do so much more before we were able to enter that environment. And then we spent 2 years getting to know each other. After a year and a half, we actually said, okay, this is what we need. This is the type of in-store experience at the top of the elevator. We co-designed our experience, like picked out the succulents, put all of our categories in place and so forth, we knew what to ask and we knew what the partnership needed to be on both sides before we said yes. And that sometimes enables that to be a much bigger, much more fruitful long-term partnership in the end.
Love that. I want to, John, come back to you in a moment, but I am curious with one topic that's come up, several times already today, which is this idea of co-creation, right? You're co-creating, the experience with your partner, and that helps a lot in terms of engagement, so on and so forth. It also requires more work from the partner in a sense up front than something which is just kind of ready to go, sign, and then distribute. So I'm curious how you all, or if anyone has particular thoughts on this, think about that trade-off.
I would say there that when we have done partnerships that have been product intensive out the gate, they have not worked for us. The lift has been greater than the return. Where we have done product collaborations most successfully, you're going to all think I'm obsessed with golf, which I am because it's such a growing business for us, but not because I'm a player, is that with Justin Rose, we built that partnership and we're in year 3 right now, and we have just done a product collaboration. The first 2 years, we were learning about how he resonated with our audience, what he liked about our product, what worked on his body, honestly, like what he looked good in. And I think it was in year 3 that we felt like we're in a good position to do a product collaboration and layer that on. So that's just been our experiences out the gate. It wasn't necessarily the best idea for us. We've done it not so well twice, but third time worked a charm.
That's a great counterexample. I love that. Anyone else have an example there?
Yeah, unfortunately, couldn't have had a similar experience than Mickey in terms of the product intensive where you invest all this up front. Those are the least ROI. Those are the ones that perform the worst. I'm actually really curious to turn this back to the CEO founders here to see how much of a parallel this is in such a heavy brand space. But our most successful natural evolution has actually been in our white label practice, where we found on the street firms that are competitors to ours, CPA firms, financial analyst practices, individuals out there who lack the bandwidth or the skill set. And we're not changing anything that we do. We simply have a market advantage in terms of scale and talent that's democratized across the country that they can tap into. And it's been a win-win. And that's just grown organically. And so I'm curious, with brands like Bonobos and Hooked and Lively, if you all, and sorry for stealing your thunder, Michael, as a moderator, it's not
No, please.
Whether that that white label, private label aspect has ever been appealing or something that you've had success with, or whether the brand comes first.
So for us, we have, I think it's the total opposite. We've had so many people reach out to us for white label versions of the Hooked app, and previously with the music apps, that was a really big thing that people used to reach out to us for. And we kind of explored it a little bit in the early days, when I was doing the music apps, and it just ended up, it was kind of what Mickey was talking about, but applied to this, which is it ended up just being a huge waste of time and resources, and we just didn't get the ROI. And so this is a really interesting difference, I think, that you're bringing up potentially between the B2C and B2B spaces, where you get so much long-term value that accrues to your brand. And if you're giving that, if you're investing in a product and you're not kind of getting that, it's not accruing to your brand, you end up not kind of, reaping the rewards. At least that's our experience.
In our experience, we believe, you have to be laser focused on brand, because that distraction will get you off course and your brand will start to get murky. However, one thing that's unique to us is our first investor was our manufacturer and supplier. And what we saw was this new formula of building a company with supply chain as your investor really worked for Lively and gave Lively an incredible outcome for the initial investors. And so what we've done is we've replicated that formula and since used that same methodology of having the supply chain be the first investor for 2 new companies, one that just recently launched about 2 weeks ago called Weekend Nation, and one more. So there's different ways to use those valuable partnerships in new and creative ways for others.
Michelle, could you actually speak a little bit about the downsides, of any, of having those strategic investors, where there's lock-in, where your optionality was reduced, and just how you've thought about those trade-offs?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, anytime you take on an investor, I tell people it's like you're marrying them, like you're literally getting married. Like, make sure that it's not just a great first date. Make sure that you ruffle the feathers and understand what a heated moment could look like. And so I was really fortunate that I brought on 3 different investors and they all came back in for all subsequent rounds until we exited. And that was really important to me because I've seen being in other companies that go wrong, where you have an investor that's misaligned on your core values and the way that you see the world. You'll have these stop gaps in terms of how you see yourself growing your business and your team culturally. It could also prevent you from the outcome that you want, whether that's an exit or an IPO or just to have a profitable baseline business. But the bottom line is the journey that you're going on, your investor and your investor's objectives better be aligned. If they're misaligned, it's going to stunt the growth and inherently put you in the statistics of failure within 5 years.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about, partnerships that go wrong for a moment. So, folks, obviously, with anything, you do enough of it, some of it's going to go sideways, things are going to go wrong. So folks have stories about how best to kind of handle that once it inevitably does happen and how to kind of wind down a partnership gracefully. I think that would be interesting to talk about as well. Unless there are no examples of an elegant wind down for a partnership. Michelle, go ahead.
I mean, I think we've all overinvested from what you've heard in product collaborations, whether it's that time that you invested in figuring out how to make it work. And we've done that one too many times where the collaboration actually never came to life because we knew after 5 meetings that we still weren't aligned on just like basic terms or how we were going to do it. We actually spent a year with a publisher trying to figure out a collaboration. And at the end of the day, it was a waste of time for both sides. And so now the way that we think about it is, how is that first meeting? Like, just the same thing with an investor. Are your goals aligned? And is it easy? It's human interaction. If your interaction isn't in sync, you're not going to go on a second date. So don't force the second, the third, the fourth, and the 10th, because it's going to end up not going well.
I'll just jump in and add to that. I think this is such an astute point, and it's something that we've heard, I think, each of us say, which is, we've said it in different ways, focus on the partnerships that are organic, focus on when they're easy. John mentioned kind of getting that answer in the first meeting. And Mickey also just talked about focus in general. And I think you can apply that to any aspect of your business, but just, you're going to have 1,000 different opportunities to pursue. Focus on the one that just happens naturally and it feels like a fit, and it's not sucking your energy. It feels like it's giving you energy.
And I'd actually love to pick that up from the tail end, to Mickey's just spot on theme of focus. Just because something works at the outset doesn't mean it's going to work forever. And I think that's one of the toughest things, to call a spade, that this is not working anymore. I think a short example, we partnered extensively with accelerators, incubators, where very small startups congregate at the outset, and candidly, we outgrew them. Our candidate profile, our client profile moved to the enterprise space, to the middle market space. And so how do you gracefully transition these individuals and these groups that depended on you? And we ended up doing that through self-service. How can you create one-to-many tools that don't require the TLC and the investment, but you can still retain that brand equity and leave them in a better spot? But it's one of the toughest things to do, to pull the plug when you say, hey, this has been great. This can't be where we focus anymore.
And I think, building on all of the points, I would just say that, it depends what your definition of success is, and so therefore what failure is as well. I think that one of the things that we have learned is, and this was why I made my point up front about like being clear about your objective. We did a partnership early in COVID with the COVID-19 Response Relief Fund to raise money through product sales. And look, here's what we learned. We learned that it didn't drive a ton of sales, but it drove a ton of goodwill, both internally and externally. And that has value, obviously, but I think that there were maybe some who expected it to have a revenue outcome. In hindsight, it was probably never really going to do that. And it was really about that kind of goodwill outcome. and as much internally, I would say, as externally. So I think it depends on your measure of success and therefore sort of what you can deem a success or a failure.
So thank you, Nikki. We've spoken a lot about, being opportunistic, looking for these kind of well-aligned opportunities. I'm curious on the operational side, how folks think about setting themselves up to be easy to partner with, right? We've all tried to do a partnership with someone who had, 100 pages of legalese that got sent over and privacy requirements and all that kind of stuff that if you weren't prepared for, it was going to take a long time and drag the deal out. But I'm curious if there are other places where you've made investments to make it easy for you to partner with other companies.
I think one thing you can do is have like a very clear example of what you're looking to do, right? And so often what happens is you have two, communities or companies coming together and saying, we want to partner, but neither one has an idea in terms of like what they want that process to look like operationally. And so if you can be the one that operationally is bringing clarity to say, okay, so we start with this mutual NDA, and then we go into this document, which is 3 pages, and these are the areas to look for. And then we do X, Y, and Z, and we get to execution and ta-da for the world. I think someone needs to lead that kind of lane. And if you can be the side that is really clear and has that road already paved with your objectives, like what we've all been saying, what we want to get out of it, I think it goes back to, again, focus and clarity. If you can provide that clarity, you'll get the machine to work quickly. The other thing I would say is be the partner to keep it light. Don't over complicate it, because that is what will kill the partnership, is overcomplication. And don't build it for the exception, build it for the rule. Don't build it for the what if and the what if and the what if, because that again will kill the deal.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So, building on that a little bit, I think it depends on the type of scale you're going for with your partnerships, and whether who sort of is who kind of holds the power in the relationship. So, if you're a startup, small startup starting out and you want to partner with a major corporation, it's really kind of building on what Michelle said, which is just make things easy for them. And a lot of times, in the initial partnership, it's a test. They're testing you out to see, is this worth it for them? Usually, if the first kind of iteration is successful, there's a lot more to be done there. And so, a lot of this just depends on your own kind of mentality and just personality as a founder. But I like to just be easy to deal with. And I, usually in those initial partnerships, I don't negotiate super hard. If there are things that are really important to them, I just kind of let them have it. And it's more, I want to prove my worth and show that it makes sense. So for example, we partner a lot with bigger media companies like Snapchat, for example, has been a really great partner for us on distribution. And that was one where in the beginning, it was just like, it takes them so long. It takes a large company so long to just get you agreements and get their lawyers to look at stuff. And if your lawyers are sending back like 100 red lines, nothing's ever going to get done. And so I'm just kind of telling my lawyers, it's okay. Let's be chill. Let's not worry about it. This is going to be fine. Let's just try and get something done. On the flip side, we partner a lot with writers, screenwriters, novelists. A lot of these are, young people just starting out in their careers, and we partner with thousands of them. And for that, the tables are reversed. But also there's a ton of volume. We have so many people we're trying to process through our funnel. And so we can't be bespoke about every single deal. So we're kind of Snapchat in this scenario. And, so we have these agreements, the terms are laid out very clearly. To Michelle's point, we send it out, this is the process, this is what it's going to look like. And we don't negotiate on anything. And it's kind of a take it or leave it.
Thank you. Well, we have, I hope, time to just do one quick round robin with the one piece of advice you would have for founders interested in pursuing partnerships, and then we can hand it back off to Michelle. Parana, why don't you wrap it up?
I would just, go back to saying, focus on your product, build a great product, and really build something that you yourself believe in and you can go evangelize yourself. Because if you are asking somebody else to be an evangelist for you, they are going to get the energy and the belief from your energy and your belief.
Shelby.
Absolutely. What I would say to kind of echo that as well is just, make sure that the partner is excited about your growth plan, and that they have the right expectations. I'm a huge fan of action items. So if we go into a meeting and we're talking about what our expectations are, making sure that we follow up afterwards to say, here's what we're expecting from your company and here's what you should be expecting from mine as well, to help make sure transparency is provided.
John?
Be honest with yourself about where your product is differentiated, where you're strongest, and then find the partners that you are going to make good with that strength. If you're stretching, it's going to be difficult to make that work. So I think just as candid as you can be by looking in the mirror and finding where you can benefit someone else, it seems to work pretty well.
All right. Vicky?
I would say fewer partnerships leveraged broadly. So, get in bed with someone, if that's not an inappropriate analogy, and, make sure that you are leveraging it and executing it as broadly as you can.
All right, Michelle, take us home.
Be human about it, regardless of how big your company is. Just remember, it's humans connecting with humans. Keep it light and keep it human.
All right, well, thank you so much, folks. I hope the audience enjoyed this panel as much as I did, and I will pass it on to Michelle.
That was amazing. Thank you so much to all the panelists. And for us, it's funny, I'm reflecting on what we say at Founder Made, and a key question that has come up from one of our partnerships leads is just asking, what is your dream partnership? Like, what is that defined by? So I appreciate all the last tidbits there and the thoughtfulness around all those incredible just ways to think about what does really build a powerful partnership.